Have you ever felt uncomfortable with the chaos of everyday life? As if you were losing your way? God continues the Bible, and yet the pressure of the world can distance us from what really matters, our connection with God. But what if I told you that there is a way to rediscover this essence? Do you want to know what it is? Just like a great man who was chosen by God and who had the courage to follow an inner voice, you too can disconnect from distractions and hear God in a new and powerful way. In this video, you will experience how this adventure can not only bring clarity, but also real-life transformation. Are you ready to leave behind what is stopping you from moving forward and discover the purpose that God has for you? Yes or no? Watch the 17 best motivational revelations never exposed and take the first of 17 steps that I will show you here towards your change. And let's go to number 1. But first, just check if you are already subscribed to the channel, because the next videos will be a series of content that will motivate you. Don't waste time. Listen to this. It was a quiet morning in a vibrant city, filled with bustling markets and people coming and going, absorbed in their daily routines. Among these souls was an ordinary man, but with a restless heart, yearning for something beyond what his eyes could see. That day, however, something extraordinary was about to happen. As the sun rose above the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city, a voice resounded in his soul, deep and powerful. The voice called to him, like an echo from a world beyond his own. It was God, the Creator, calling him to a new adventure. Leave your land, your kin, and go to the land that I will show you. With those words, a wave of emotion and doubt flooded the man's heart. What did it really mean to leave everything behind? The boldness required to answer such a call was daunting. How could he leave his home, his friends, his traditions? Uncertainty hung in the air, but a flame of curiosity and hope began to burn within him. What if this land is everything I have ever dreamed of, he thought. So he decided to listen to his intuition, which told him that God had a greater plan for him. He quickly gathered his wife together and told her about the mystical experience he had just had. Her eyes lit up with a mixture of concern and hope. Leaving everything behind is risky, she said, but her faith in her husband and in God was unshakable. Together, they decided that this adventure could be the answer to his deepest longings. With courage pumping through his veins, he began to prepare. Each item he packed represented a piece of his former life, and at the same time, a step into the unknown. He looked around, saying goodbye to friends and family, knowing that this departure was not just a physical change, but a transformation, and began to understand that even in the face of uncertainty, there was beauty in the freedom to pursue what God had promised. During the journey, he and his wife faced hardships, but also moments of pure joy. They marveled at the stars that shone brightly at night, imagining what the new lands that lay ahead would be like. At one such time, he looked up at the sky and said a silent prayer, thanking them for the boldness that had brought them there. He sensed that he was approaching something great. As they reached their destination, the promised land began to take shape before them. The landscape was breathtaking, but he knew that the true value of this adventure lay in the courage to answer God's call. He realized that boldness was, in fact, the key to new adventures, and this adventure was not just about a new place, but about a new destiny that would shape not only his life, but the lives of generations to come. So the call was not just an invitation to leave his homeland. It was a call to enter into a deeper relationship with God, a relationship that would lead him to a legacy that would echo through the ages. This adventure teaches us that every time we hear a call and decide to be bold, we open the door to new opportunities and experiences. We are inspired of courage in our own lives, because boldness is the key to opening the doors to the adventures that always await us, and it is possible to get rich with wisdom. I will show you here from now on. Do you want it? So stay until the end. Number 1. When we answer the call, even if the path is unknown, we find a beauty that transcends our understanding, transforming each challenge into a new opportunity for growth and achievements to move forward. Imagine now a different world, where the stars shone brightly and the winds told tales of ancient travelers. There he lived in a vibrant city, but it could not contain the dreams that burned in his heart. One day, as the clouds slowly passed across the sky, a powerful, gentle voice echoed within him. "Leave your country and your kindred and go to the land that I will show you." It was God's promise, a summons to leave behind everything he knew. This call was not just a change of scenery. It was the door to an uncertain future, but one full of promise. A promised land, a new life. It danced before his mind like a mirage. He knew the adventure would be long and full of challenges, but the prospect of a new home was irresistible. In his heart, faith began to grow like a seed planted in fertile soil. He gathered his family, his wife and his nephew, and shared the revelation that would change their lives. "We are going/God has promised that this land will be ours," he said, his eyes shining with determination. Uncertainty hung in the air, but the courage in their hearts overcame their fear of the unknown. As they set out, the reality of their adventure unfolded before them. Each step was an act of faith. The path was not easy. The desert stretched out like vast waves of sand, and the mountains rose imposingly, challenging them to move forward. At times, the difficulties seemed insurmountable, but he always reminded them that each step into the unknown brought new opportunities. He spoke of God's promises, rekindling hope in their hearts. One night, under a full moon, as the group gathered around the campfire, he looked up at the stars. He told his family of the greatness of the land that awaited them, a place where they would prosper and become a great nation. "God has said that I will be the father of many nations," he proclaimed, as if the stars themselves responded to his faith. Doubts were not absent. At times, the silence of the night was filled with restless thoughts. What if they didn't find the land? What if God's promises didn't come true? But in each of these moments, God's voice echoed louder in his heart. "Trust me," that voice said. And so he decided that uncertainty was not an obstacle, but an opportunity to deepen his faith. After days of traveling, they finally sighted the land. The green hills and flower-filled valleys presented a vision of hope and prosperity. However, when they set foot on this promised land, they realized that the adventure was just beginning. The land was full of challenges. People already lived there, and the struggle for survival would become a constant. But he did not let himself be discouraged. He believed that each challenge was an opportunity to show his faith in action. He built altars, not only as an act of worship, but as a symbol that, regardless of the difficulties, he was committed to God's promises. With each altar he built, he not only strengthened his own faith, but also that of his family. This story is a powerful reminder that as we follow the uncertain steps of the unknown, we will find opportunities we could never have imagined. Each step he took toward the promised land not only brought him closer to a new land, but also to a new purpose. He knew that true wealth was not found in owning land alone, but in cultivating faith, hope, and the bonds that bound him to his family. So when we look back at his journey, we are invited to reflect on our own adventures. Each challenge and change brings with it new opportunities, courage to move forward, even in the face of the unknown, trusting that there is a greater purpose guiding our steps. Number 2, the promise of the promised land is a call to all of us, a reminder that what lies ahead can be even more beautiful than we have ever known, and that we will enjoy it. One day in a vibrant city, full of busy markets and people coming and going, absorbed in their routines. Among these souls was an ordinary man, but with a restless heart, yearning for something beyond what his eyes could see. That day, however, something extraordinary was about to happen. As the sun rose over the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city, a voice resonated in his soul, deep and powerful like an echo from a world beyond his own. It was God, the Creator, calling him to a new adventure. "Leave your country, your relatives, and go to the land that I will show you." With those words, a wave of emotion and doubt flooded his heart. What did it really mean to leave everything behind? The boldness it took to answer that call was frightening. How could he leave his home, his friends, his traditions? Uncertainty hung in the air, but a flame of curiosity and hope began to burn within him. What if this land is everything I ever dreamed of, he thought. So, he decided to listen to his intuition, which said that God had a greater plan for him. He gathered his wife and told her about the mystical experience he had just had. Her eyes lit up with a mix of worry and hope. Leaving everything behind is risky, she said, but her faith in her husband and God was unshakable. Together, they decided that this journey could be the answer to their deepest desires. With courage pulsing through his veins, he then began to prepare. Each object he placed in his luggage represented a piece of his previous life, and at the same time, a step towards the unknown. He looked around, saying goodbye to friends and family, knowing that this departure was not just a physical change, but a spiritual transformation. The path unfolded before them, filled with mysteries and challenges. As they crossed deserts and mountains, Abraham realized that boldness was not just about leaving his land, but about embracing the journey itself. Every step was an affirmation of faith. He began to understand that, even in the face of uncertainty, there was beauty in the freedom to pursue what God had promised. During the journey, they faced difficulties, but also moments of pure joy. They marveled at the stars that shone brightly at night, imagining what the new lands to come would be like. In one of those moments, he looked up to the sky and said a silent prayer, thanking him for the boldness that had led them there. He felt like he was approaching something great. As they arrived in Canaan, the promised land began to take shape before them. The landscape was stunning, and he knew that the true value of that adventure lay in the courage to respond to God's call. He realized that boldness was, in fact, the key to new adventures, and that adventure was not just about a new place, but a new destination that would shape not only his life, but the lives of future generations. His call was not just an invitation to leave his land. It was a call to enter into a deeper relationship with God, a relationship that would lead to a legacy that would echo for centuries. His story teaches us that every time we hear a call and decide to be bold, we open the door to new opportunities and experiences. His adventures are inspiring. He always encourages us. Number 3, because courage is a powerful key to opening the doors of the adventures that await us. When we respond to the call, even when the path is unknown, we find a strength that transcends our ability to understand, transforming each adventure into another new opportunity for growth, and nothing will stop us. And it was a peaceful morning as he, the man who had received the divine promise, prepared to take a monumental step in his life. He looked around and saw his wife, with an expectant gleam in her eyes, and his nephew, ready to embark on this unknown journey. This wouldn't be just any trip. It was God's call, an invitation to leave everything behind and head into the unknown. With their belongings carefully packed, they gathered under the blue sky, which seemed vaster than ever. He knew he was about to embark on an adventure that would change their lives forever. As the first rays of sunlight touched his face, he felt a mixture of anxiety and excitement. The adventure began not just with changing places, but with the transformation of their destinies. "Are we ready?" asked the wife, her gaze steady and hopeful. She knew this trip would require courage, but it also held the promise of something great. His nephew, always by his side, nodded affirmatively, his heart beating with the adrenaline of the unknown. Together, they represented the strength of family bonds, of shared dreams, and the courage to leave. With every step they took, the story unfolded, so he led the way, his faith guiding his every move. They crossed green fields, majestic mountains, and rivers that snaked like pulsing veins in the earth. The surrounding beauty was stunning, but the journey would not be without its challenges. As they walked, they faced moments of uncertainty, such as sudden storms and sections of rough terrain. Yet each other's presence was a constant reminder that together they were stronger. During the long nights under the stars, they would gather around roaring fires. The shared stories and laughter resonated in the darkness, creating bonds that grew stronger every day. It was there, under the cover of night, that hope became palpable. He told of the promises God had made, of the land they were destined to conquer, and his eyes shone as he described visions of a prosperous future. The wife, listening to every word, felt her heart beat with the possibility of a new beginning. But like every great journey, there were challenges ahead. They met other travelers, some friendly, others not so much. The road was not just physical, it was also emotional and spiritual. Each meeting brought new lessons. The distrust of some could have led to conflicts, but the husband's wisdom always sought peace. He knew that, with his family, they could weather any storm. The connection that formed between them was a powerful reminder that the journey is richer with company. Together, they learned to cultivate patience and resilience. Each challenge overcome became a story to tell. Each laugh shared a precious memory. They realized that even in difficult times, love and unity could light the way. Throughout this adventure, he not only guided his family physically, but also spiritually. He taught them the importance of faith, a faith that does not waver in the face of challenges. In moments of doubt, they remembered the words Abraham often repeated: "We are under God's protection, and He will guide us." As the journey continued, the landscape around them changed as they did. With every kilometer covered, the family was not only walking towards a new land, but also towards a new purpose, a new dream that would be built together. Thus, the adventure that began was not just a physical journey, but an odyssey of faith, love, and discovery. They were about to write a story that would resonate for generations, showing that when we face the unknown with courage and companionship, we are capable of conquering not only the promised land, but also the treasure of unbreakable bonds. And when we are together, the adventure becomes richer and full of possibilities. Number 4. After all, it is in companies that we find the strength to move forward, even in the face of the unknown. But when he reached the promised land, his eyes lit up with hope. This was the land where God had promised he and his descendants would settle, a place that, according to divine visions, would flow with milk and honey. But the reality, as is often the case, turned out to be far more complex and challenging than he could have imagined. As soon as he set foot on the land, he soon realized that the path to fulfilling the promises would be fraught with obstacles. The soil that should have been fertile was now barren in some parts, and water shortages were a constant concern. Doubt began to linger in his mind. Was this really home? The landscapes that had once been glorified in his visions now revealed challenges that would test his faith and resolve. As he looked around, he saw nomadic tribes, each defending their territory, and he soon realized that peaceful coexistence would be a challenge. The land was full of uncertainty, and every hill seemed to hide more obstacles. Yet amid this harsh reality, he also began to understand an essential truth. The challenges he faced were actually opportunities in disguise. As he walked the rough trails of the promised land, each step became a lesson. He remembered God's promises and asked himself, "What can I learn from this?" The struggles of cultivating the land and finding water became lessons in patience and perseverance. Instead of becoming discouraged, he began to see each obstacle as an opportunity to grow. One of the first challenges he faced was a lack of food. Food shortages affected not only his family, but also his servants and shepherds. Rather than despair, he called a meeting together. "We need to be creative and find solutions together," he said, his voice full of determination. This unity transformed what could have been a crisis into an opportunity to strengthen their bonds. From then on, they began exploring new ways to cultivate the land and share resources. This spirit of collaboration became a hallmark of his leadership. Another significant challenge was dealing with the locals. Tensions were palpable, but he did not back down. Instead, he decided to build alliances. He reached out to the leaders of neighboring tribes, offering respect and friendship. And this approach resulted in peace agreements that benefited everyone. What could have been a battlefield became a fertile ground for collaboration and mutual understanding. What he came to realize is that each challenge was an opportunity for learning and growth. He began to see hardships as God's way of shaping his character and leadership. Scarcity taught him to be more creative. Tensions with the nomads made him more diplomatic, and the obstacles that faced him only made him more determined to move forward. Each new day presented its own struggles, but also its own rewards. But he learned to trust God in the midst of uncertainty, to recognize that while challenges might seem daunting, they were also opportunities to build something greater. He knew that the adventure of faith was not about the absence of difficulties, but about how we respond to them. So as we reflect on the adventure of a leader, may we remember that the challenges we face in our lives are actually opportunities in disguise. Every obstacle is a chance to learn, grow, and move closer to our goals. Like him, let us find the courage to face difficulties, knowing that through them, we become stronger and more resilient. The land of challenges is not just a story from the past. It is an invitation to each of us. Number 5. It is worth looking at our own difficulties and seeing in them the possibility of transformation. We know that we have the power to change our narrative and find opportunities, even in the most adverse situations. So, have you ever been through this? Or do you know someone who has? Write in the comments below and tell me about that experience. For it was just like that at a time when the land of prosperity was seen as the promise of an abundant future, he and his family found themselves in the midst of an unexpected crisis. After years of waiting and hoping, when they had finally established their roots in that long-awaited land, a severe famine began to spread. The sky, once full of promise, now seemed heavy and oppressive, and the land that should have flowed with milk and honey became barren and desolate. Imagine what a man of faith would do, looking at the weary faces of his wife and his servants. The wind blew, bringing with it dust and sadness. What was to be done in the face of the scarcity? The pressure of famine weighed on his shoulders like a rock. He knew he had to act, and quickly. The need to provide for his family and protect those he loved forced him to make a difficult decision. The famine forced him into a dilemma. Should he remain in the land in search of a solution, or should he press on to Egypt, a land known for its abundant harvests? This choice was not simple. Egypt was a foreign place, where God's promises could seem distant and unfamiliar. But, as is often the case in our lives, sometimes changing direction is the key to finding solutions. He decided to head to Egypt. During his adventure, the desert stretched out before him like a sea of sand and uncertainty. Each step he took was a mix of anxiety and hope. He knew that the change could bring both risks and rewards. But the love for his family and the need to provide for their needs drove him to move forward. Arriving in Egypt, the feeling of being in an unfamiliar place was overwhelming. The scorching heat of the sun and the curious looks of the Egyptians made his heart race. However, the sight of the green plantations and abundant rivers brought a breath of relief. Here, the possibilities were endless, but a new concern quickly settled in his mind: how to protect his beautiful and attractive wife. However, what began as a simple journey to find food soon turned into a test of faith and courage. Abraham had to remember that even in the most difficult situations, God was by his side, guiding his steps. And this reminder would become crucial when things took an unexpected turn. When he decided to impersonate his sister, he faced a dilemma of protecting his family while exposing himself to risk. It was a test of his faith and courage, showing that sometimes solutions to problems can come with new challenges. This complex situation teaches us that changing direction, while necessary, can lead to unexpected consequences. Like Abraham, we all face times of hunger in our lives, not just for food, but for hope, love, and direction. When faced with hardship, change can seem daunting, but it is often the only way to find the abundance we seek. Every detour we take, every new road we explore, can reveal opportunities we never imagined. And the adventure in search of food teaches us that even in times of crisis, it is possible to find unexpected solutions and paths that lead to new possibilities every time. Like him, may we have the courage to change direction, to venture into new lands, and to trust that even in the face of hardship, there is purpose and light ahead. So as we reflect on this adventure, may we be inspired to not fear change. May we remember that sometimes we have to take risks and explore new paths to find the abundance God has in store for us. Number 6. Every step of faith is a step toward a better future. And like him, may we rise up and keep going, even when the path seems uncertain. You see, even in a time when the desert sands whispered secrets and the stars shone with promise, there was a man whose life would be marked by challenges and difficult choices. His journey took him to a strange land, Egypt, where hardships would become tests not only of faith, but also of courage and love. Imagine him and his wife crossing the border into Egypt. The air was thick with uncertainty, and famine threatened the lives of many in their caravan. He knew that the safety of his family was at stake. As he entered Egypt, however, a fear overcame him. He realized that his wife, with her stunning beauty, might attract unwanted glances and even the lust of the powerful. His heart, though trusting in God, beat with worry. "If they ask who you are, tell them you are my sister," he suggested to his wife. "If they know you are my wife, they may kill me to have you." This was not an easy decision. He was risking not only his own safety, but that of his beloved. This situation revealed the frailty of human beings, even in men of faith. He was about to enter hostile territory, where love and courage would be put to the test. Upon their arrival in Egypt, Sarah's beauty truly caught their attention. Pharaoh, the ruler, learned of her and took her to his palace, attracted by her grace and beauty. At this moment, his true courage was being tested. He was at a moral crossroads. Should he protect his wife and risk his own life, or should he stay safe, even if it meant putting her in danger? But his love for her was more powerful than his fear. He began to feel the urgency to act. In his heart, he knew that her safety was more important than any personal comfort. Courage is often revealed in the darkest moments, and for him, this was one of those moments. With determination, he made his way to Pharaoh's palace. Amid the tension, he interceded, reminding Pharaoh that he was his sister. This afforded him some protection, but not without risk. True love requires courage to act, even when all seems lost. He knew he needed a solution, not only for himself, but especially for the woman he loved. And God, in his infinite goodness, intervened. Pharaoh began to suffer plagues, and he soon realized that something was wrong. When he discovered that she was his wife, he was furious. "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" Pharaoh demanded, expelling them from Egypt. "Take them away and don't come back." What could have been a tragedy became a victory due to the courage of the head of the family. His intercession not only protected his wife, but also gave him the freedom to move forward. They left Egypt with riches, but more importantly, they left together, strengthened by the love and experience they had shared. This story reminds us that true love moves us to act with courage, even in the face of adversity. And in protecting her, he not only demonstrated his devotion, but also reaffirmed that when we stand up for those we love, we can change the course of our lives. And so his courage has resonated through time, inspiring us to stand up for those we love. Each of us can find moments when courage is needed, whether in our relationships, in our communities, or in our personal struggles. Love is a call to action, a force that compels us to act bravely, to do what is right, even when the path is uncertain. So as we reflect on his courage in protecting his wife, may we also seek that same courage in our own lives. May we remember that even in the face of hardship, love compels us to act, and that action can change everything. After all, number 7, the true legacy is not just your faith, but also the courage we have to love and protect our families. And would you have that courage for a goal? And as he gazed at the seemingly endless desert sands and the starry sky with courage and faith, he prepared for a new chapter in his life. After years of challenges and uncertainty, he was about to return to Canaan, the land that God had promised to him and his descendants. But this was not just a physical return. It was an adventure of transformation and new beginnings. Imagine him, now with his family and servants, crossing the arid landscapes toward Canaan. The path was not easy. He had faced a series of hardships, from the famine that drove him to Egypt to the conflicts that arose between his shepherds and those of his nephew. These experiences shaped him, tested his faith, and taught him valuable lessons about trust and resilience. Returning to the land symbolized more than just returning to a place. It was a spiritual rebirth. He had learned to hear God's voice more clearly, to trust in God's promises even when circumstances seemed unfavorable. He had seen how quickly life could change, and now, wiser and stronger, he was ready to claim what was rightfully his. As he walked through the hills and valleys of the Promised Land, nostalgia and hope intertwined in his heart. He remembered the promises made to him. This land will be yours, and your descendants will be as the stars of heaven. Now, as he set foot on that land again, he felt a new determination. What he had lost would not define him. His experiences had made him stronger. Arriving in the Promised Land, he built altars, a practice that had become an expression of his gratitude and faith. Each altar was a reminder of his past experiences, his struggles and triumphs. He knew that true strength came not only from victories, but also from the ability to rise after each fall. With every stone he laid, with every prayer he offered, he was reaffirming his commitment to God and his trust in his promises. This return to the land was not just a personal achievement. It was an act of courage that would inspire everyone around him. He became a living example that even when life knocks us down, we always have the chance to rise again. His experiences of failure and learning made him a leader and a role model for his family and future generations. The strength he had found was not just for himself. It was a strength that would echo through time. On our own path, we often encounter difficulties that make us doubt our ability to rise again. His story reminds us that every fall is an opportunity to grow. Every detour in our journey is a chance to learn, to strengthen our faith, and to prepare ourselves for the challenges that lie ahead. His return to his homeland symbolizes this truth, that starting over is not only possible, but an essential part of our journey. Like him, we can find the courage to face our struggles again, armed with the lessons learned and the strength gained from each experience. Returning to the Promised Land is an invitation for each of us. It is a call to remember that there's always a second chance. There's always a new beginning. So understand that by being inspired by his courage and determination, we may fall, yes, but we will have the chance to rise stronger. And that, just like him, we can return to our own with renewed faith, ready to claim the promises that await us. Number 8. Life is full of cycles, and each return is an opportunity for growth, hope, and new beginnings. See that he shared with his nephew an adventure under an intense blue sky and many, many stars. Known for his unwavering faith and generous heart, he loved his nephew dearly, who accompanied him on his journeys. Together, they experienced many adventures, but they also faced challenges that tested the strength of their bond. As his flock grew, as did his nephew's, disputes arose between their shepherds. The land was no longer sufficient to sustain so much life. He, always wise and peaceful, realized that it was time to act. He wanted to avoid conflict and preserve harmony between them. So, with a gesture of generosity that few would have the courage to make, he decided to give Lot the opportunity to choose his own land. "Choose, beloved nephew," he said with a gentle smile. "If you go left, I will go right. If you choose right, I will go left." This moment carried a great lesson. Generosity opens doors to new blessings. He knew that by putting his nephew's needs ahead of his own, he was not only showing love, but also trusting that God would take care of him. And the nephew, his eyes shining with enthusiasm, looked at the vast plains of Sodom and Gomorrah, attracted by the richness of that fertile land. He decided to settle there without thinking twice. To many, this choice seemed like an incredible opportunity, but the nephew's decision was fraught with mystery, for he did not see the dangers that life in those cities would bring. While he and his nephew went on their way, his uncle remained in a less promising land, but his faith and generosity did not go unnoticed. He continued to cultivate his relationship with God, trusting that greater blessings would come from his selfless choice. So time passed, and the nephew, surrounded by all the wealth and comfort of Sodom, began to distance himself from the values he had always learned from his uncle. He forgot the lessons of love and respect, immersing himself in a world where superficiality and greed reigned. At the same time, his uncle, far from temptations and challenges, became an example of faith and resilience. Their separation was not just geographical. It was a turning point in their lives. The story teaches us that often the choices we make in search of comfort can distance us from what really matters. His uncle's generosity, on the other hand, led him to a life filled with blessings and wisdom. Life presents us with situations in which we must decide between our desires and the needs of others. Sometimes, true wealth is not found in material possessions, but in the relationships we cultivate and the generosity we offer. And so, his and his nephew's journey continues to resonate in our hearts, reminding us that even amid the mystery of choices, love and generosity will always guide us toward new blessings. The uncle, a true seeker of God, had a God-fearing heart, and throughout his adventure, he received extraordinary promises that would change the destiny of an entire nation. The covenant that God made with him was not just a simple promise, but a deep and lasting bond, destined to endure for generations. One night, when the sky was clear and the stars shone like jewels, God called Abraham to a special meeting. Abraham, already tired from his wanderings, sat under the moonlight, contemplating the vast expanses of the land that God had promised to him and his descendants. The gentle breeze seemed to whisper ancient secrets, and the atmosphere carried an air of expectation. What would God have to say to him this time? Suddenly, a voice resounded in the silence of the night. "Do not be afraid, for I am your shield and your reward will be great." The divine declaration made his heart race, but he remembered the doubts that accompanied him. He was old, his wife was old, and they still had no children. What did this mean for God's promises? God, in his infinite wisdom, knew of his insecurities. He then took the patriarch outside the tent and had him look up at the stars. "Count the stars if you can, so shall your descendants be." The magnitude of that image filled Abraham with a mixture of awe and hope. Such a grand promise seemed impossible. But faith begins exactly where reason ends. The covenant was reaffirmed. God promised that he would be the father of many nations and that his descendants would inherit the earth. Each word of God was like an invisible thread, weaving together a future full of possibilities. God's faithfulness was not just a declaration. It was an invitation to trust. With each promise, Abraham was called to believe, even when everything around him seemed to contradict hope. The mystery of this covenant was that, even in the midst of uncertainty, he chose to trust. He did not see the immediate fulfillment of all the promises, but each step he took was a demonstration of faith. His journey became a testament to the fact that God's faithfulness is a sure foundation, even when the road is full of obstacles. In the days that followed, the patriarch's life was marked by challenges. He faced difficult decisions, moments of doubt, and even attempts to stray from the path. But in each of these moments, God's voice echoed in his heart, reaffirming the promise and inviting him to remain steadfast. What can we learn from this story? God's faithfulness is an invitation to our trust, a reminder that even when things seem uncertain, there is a greater power guiding us. Like Abraham, we are called to look beyond our circumstances and believe in what God has promised us. The covenant reaffirmed between God and him teaches us that, number 9, in the journey of life, trust in God is the light that guides us. As we continue to walk our path, may we always remember that in the midst of any storm, God's faithfulness is a beacon, always inviting us to believe and trust in his wonderful plan. Names carry deep meanings and stories behind each letter, and his was no different, as he was a tireless traveler, a man of faith who sought to understand the purpose of his life. His journey was full of challenges, but he never gave up. And despite the difficulties, God had an extraordinary plan in store for him, and it was one night, while the wind blew gently and the stars danced in the sky, that God called him for a transformative conversation. It was a moment of sacred silence, where a man's doubts and fears met with the certainty and power of the Creator. The patriarch was about to receive a new identity, something that would change not only his life, but the destiny of many generations. God looked into his eyes and made a promise that would resonate through time. Your name will no longer be Abram, but Abraham, for I have made you the father of many. This revelation brought a mixture of surprise and amazement. How could a childless man become the father of a great nation? Yet the name change was not just a matter of language. It was a powerful symbol of transformation. The word Abraham meant father of a multitude, and in that moment, God was changing not only his name but also his identity. From that moment on, Abraham would no longer be known solely for his heritage or his failures. He would be recognized as a chosen man with a great legacy ahead of him. But this transformation required something more, a willingness on Abraham's part to believe in God's promise, even when reality seemed to contradict his hopes. What did it mean to be called father of a multitude in a childless home? This new identity required not only faith, but also an active commitment to the future God had promised him. As Abraham continued on his journey, he encountered doubts and challenges, but the name change became a constant reminder of who he was called to be. Each time someone called him Abraham, he heard not just a name, but an echo of God's promise. This new identity motivated him to rise up and move forward, even when the obstacles seemed insurmountable. The story of Abraham teaches us that our identities can change when we follow God. Like Abraham, we are invited to let go of the limitations of the past and embrace the potential that the Creator has placed within us. Within each of us is a new identity waiting to be discovered, a calling to a greater purpose. When we face challenges and feel lost, it is crucial to remember that Abraham's name change is a powerful lesson. It teaches us that when we follow God, we are able to reinvent ourselves and become something much greater than we could ever imagine. Like Abraham, we are invited to look beyond our current circumstances and embrace the truth that with God, all things are possible. In this story of transformation, Abraham becomes a symbol of faith and courage. It challenges us to respond to our own identity, to believe in God's promises, and to walk toward the future He has prepared for us. After all, number 10, with every name change, there is a new opportunity to become who we were truly called to be. Imagine, in those ancient times, in the midst of the vast desert and starry nights, there he was Abraham, who carried in his heart great promises. And God had chosen him to be the father of an entire nation. But there was a crucial detail that made this promise seem distant. He and his wife Sarah were very old, and they still had no children. Hope seemed to fade with the passing of the years, but God had a plan that would transform everything. One morning, as the sun slowly rose over the horizon, Abraham found himself in a moment of reflection. The soft light illuminated his tent, but it also illuminated his worries. He remembered the promises made by God, the words that sounded like music in his ears. You will be the father of a great nation. However, the reality of his life seemed opposite to this truth. Doubt began to settle in his heart, like a shadow that refused to leave. But God, faithful to his promises, did not abandon Abraham. In a divine visit, he appeared in a surprising way. Abraham, amazed and somewhat apprehensive, welcomed the visitors under the shade of a tree. That peaceful scene would soon become an extraordinary moment. Amidst conversation and laughter, God reaffirmed the promise. Next year Sarah will bear a son. The words reverberated in Abraham's heart, but he could not help but laugh nervously. How could this be possible? Sarah, upon hearing the promise from inside the tent, also laughed, thinking about the improbability of it all. It was as if the hope and dream of a family had become so distant that they now seemed almost impossible. However, God's answer was clear. Why did you laugh? Is anything too hard for the Lord? God's statement brought a new heir to the scene. Isaac's promise was not just a wish. It was a sacred covenant. It was a certainty that, even in the most unlikely situations, hope can be reborn. From that day on, Abraham and Sarah began to live with a new expectation, a renewed energy. Each step they took became an act of faith. And even when doubts began to haunt them again, God's promise became a light in the darkness. When the time finally came to fulfill the promise, Isaac was born. The laughter that had once been doubt now turned to joy and gratitude. The name Isaac, which means he will laugh, became a symbol of the miracle God had performed. Abraham and Sarah learned that hope, even when it seemed fragile, was the strength that drove them to keep dreaming. The story of Abraham and the promise of Isaac teaches us that hope is a precious gift. In times of uncertainty, when dreams seem out of reach, it is this hope that keeps us up and moving forward. It is what makes us believe that, no matter the hardships, something wonderful can come. Thus, Abraham's adventure becomes a timeless lesson. Hope is a beacon that guides us, even in the darkest nights. Every promise from God is a reminder that He is with us, even when the path seems cloudy. By holding on to this hope, we find the strength to continue dreaming, because like Abraham, we are all called to live a story of faith and transformation. Number 11, where impossibility becomes possibility. In a world where everyday life was often mixed with monotony and doubt, there was an extraordinary couple, Abraham and Sarah. They had lived through years of promise and hope, but also frustration. The dream of having a child seemed increasingly distant, like a star shining in the distance but never being touched. However, God had plans much greater than they could imagine. The days passed and Abraham and Sarah grew older. The longing for a child's laughter echoed in their souls. But reality always brought forth a deep discouragement. The life they lived in their promised land was a life of waiting. However, in the midst of this waiting, God had a miracle in store. One morning, as the sun began to rise, casting its golden light over the land, Abraham found himself in prayer, crying out to God for a sign, a reaffirmation of the promise that had been made. He needed confirmation that there was still hope, that his story was not just coming to an end. It was at this point that God sent an angel to bring unexpected news. The angel appeared to Abraham, bearing a vibrant message. Next year, Sarah will bear a son. The news seemed surreal, and once again Abraham felt that mixture of disbelief and hope. When he returned home, he found Sarah, who was also deep in thought and longing. When he told her about the angel's visit, they exchanged looks of confusion and joy. Could it really be true? Months passed. Hope began to blossom in Sarah's heart, and she began to prepare for what might be the fulfillment of that promise. The miracle still seemed far away, but each day that passed was a step closer to a dream she had almost forgotten. What had seemed impossible now began to take shape. Then one day, when spring brought colorful flowers and the air was filled with new promise, the time finally came. Isaac was born. The moment was like a dream come true. The room was filled with laughter and tears of joy. Sarah, holding her son in her arms, felt the weight of years of waiting lift in an instant. Isaac was not just a baby. He was the manifestation of God's faithfulness, a miracle that had brightened her life and that of Abraham. Word spread quickly, and everyone in the region was amazed by the story of Abraham and Sarah. They learned that making dreams come true requires patience and faith. Every tear shed in moments of doubt was now transformed into joy and gratitude. Isaac, with his name meaning he will laugh, symbolized not only the family's happiness, but also the certainty that hope should never be abandoned. The story of Isaac's birth is a powerful reminder that often the greatest miracles come after the most challenging times. The lives of Abraham and Sarah teach us that the wait may be long, but faith and patience guide us to the fulfillment of our dreams. Even when everything seems lost, it is essential to believe that God has a plan and that, in His perfect timing, dreams can come true. As we reflect on the adventure of Abraham and Sarah, we are challenged to keep our hope alive. May we always remember that each day of waiting is a step closer to our own miracle, and that, with faith and patience, we are able to transform our deepest dreams into reality. Isaac was not just a son. He was proof that, number 12, God's promise is always fulfilled, even when everything seems unlikely. Well, we are already moving on to step number 13, but before we continue, check if you have already left your like. This is very important so that YouTube can continue to promote our content, and so we can continue to motivate you. So leave your like, it's free. And would you have that courage? For the stars shone like unfulfilled promises, and Abraham lived a life marked by miracles and challenges. After years of waiting, he finally received God's most precious gift, his son Isaac. Abraham and Sarah's joy was indescribable. Isaac was not just a son. He was a fulfillment of a divine promise, a symbol of faith and hope. Yet, amid all this happiness, a shadow of mystery hung over Abraham's life. One day, as the sun rose, bringing the light of a new dawn, God called to Abraham again. It was a familiar voice, but it carried a weight he had never experienced. Abraham, the patriarch, hearing his name, ran to answer the divine call. The message God brought was incomprehensible. Sacrifice Isaac, your son, whom you love. Abraham's heart sank, as if a blanket of dark clouds had covered the brightness of the sun. Sacrifice Isaac? How could God ask such a thing? He had waited so long, struggled with doubt, and now, as he finally experienced the joy of fatherhood, God seemed to ask him to surrender everything. Faced with this devastating command, Abraham fell silent, his heart in conflict. True faith is tested in the darkest moments, and this was undoubtedly the greatest test of his life. The previous nights of doubt and prayer were now distant memories as he pondered the meaning of this request. But Abraham, even in his grief, remembered God's promises. He knew that although God's plans sometimes seem incomprehensible, there was a greater reason behind every challenge. In his mind, he wondered, if God can give life, can he also bring it back? This thought became his anchor in the midst of the emotional storm. The next day, Abraham rose before the sun, his determination visible in every movement. He prepared everything. He mounted his donkey, gathered wood, and made a fire. Isaac, innocent and full of trust, followed his father, asking curious questions. "Father, where is the lamb for the sacrifice?" The question cut Abraham's heart like a sharp blade, but he answered with faith. God will provide himself the lamb. The journey to the place of sacrifice was long and silent. Abraham struggled with his emotions, his mind filled with uncertainty and fear. But with each step, his faith grew stronger. When they reached Mount Moriah, Abraham built an altar and prepared the wood. The decisive moment approached. With tears in his eyes and a heavy heart, Abraham tied up Isaac, who still did not understand the gravity of the situation. He looked into his son's eyes, which reflected love and trust, and for a moment his courage wavered. But he remembered the voice of God, the promise that sustained his faith. At the climax of that sacrifice, Abraham raised a knife, ready to obey. In that moment of desperation and total surrender, something incredible happened. An angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven, "Do not lay a hand on the boy or do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your only son from me." This revelation brought a wave of relief and gratitude. The story of Abraham's test of faith teaches us that true faith is often tested in the most difficult moments. Abraham not only became a faithful father, but also an example of absolute trust in God, reminding us all that even in the darkest hours, the light of hope never goes out. So as we face our own tests of faith, may we learn from Abraham and remember that God always provides, even when we cannot see the way ahead. Number 13, true faith is an act of courage that leads us to trust in God's promise, even when everything seems impossible before his eyes. Yet he knew that his faith would be tested in ways he had never imagined. God had given him a command that stopped him in time. The Lord asked Abraham to sacrifice his only son, Isaac, whom he loved deeply. The news echoed in his mind like thunder. Sacrifice your son. How could a father do such a thing? The question reverberated in his heart, but God's voice was clear and imperative. What was at stake was not only the future of his family, but also the depth of his obedience. At first, the idea seemed unbearable. Abraham knew the pain of waiting and struggling to have Isaac. He also knew the beauty and joy that his son had brought into his life. But amidst the whirlwind of emotions, Abraham remembered God's faithfulness, the promises he had received, and the miracle that was Isaac's own life. This memory became his anchor in the midst of despair. Determined to obey, Abraham rose early the next morning. He left no room for doubt. He prepared the donkey, gathered the wood, and built the fire. Every movement he made was filled with meaning and sacrifice. Sarah, his wife, noticed the tension in his eyes, but he could not share the weight of that order. Obedience often requires a silence that only the heart understands. The journey to Mount Moriah was full of moments of introspection. As they walked, Isaac, innocent and curious, asked about the lamb for the sacrifice. Abraham answered firmly, but also with a pain that only a father could feel. God will provide. He repeated this phrase like a mantra, as if he were trying to convince himself that everything would be okay. When they arrived at the place, the atmosphere was charged with tension. Abraham built an altar, each stone symbolizing his unwavering faith, even in the face of adversity. With tears in his eyes and a heavy heart, he tied Isaac. The moment was agonizing, a duel between love and obedience. As he looked at his son, he saw not only a picture of the future, but also a reflection of his hopes and dreams. And then, at the climax of his ordeal, Abraham raised his knife, about to do what God had asked. But a miracle happened. An angel of the Lord stopped him, shouting, "Don't do it. Now I know that you fear God." Relief washed over Abraham, and his faith was rewarded in a surprising way. He turned and saw a lamb caught in a thicket, provided by God to be the sacrifice. Abraham's radical obedience not only saved Isaac's life, but it also gave him a deeper understanding of God's love and faithfulness. This moment became a testament to future generations, a clear example that obedience can lead to unexpected rewards. The story of Abraham teaches us that true obedience often requires courage, but it also brings with it blessings beyond our imagination. When we face challenges that test our faith, we are invited to look beyond our circumstances and trust in God's plan. Abraham's obedience shows us that even in the midst of extreme challenges, there is a greater purpose at play. When we choose to follow the path God has laid out for us, even when it seems dark or confusing, we can trust that the reward will be far greater than we can comprehend. This is the true essence of faith, knowing that God will always provide, even in the most difficult times. May we, number 14, have the courage to obey, even when the journey seems lonely and full of uncertainty. And here it was, at a time when the earth was shrouded in mystery and God's promises seemed to float in the clouds. The story of Abraham and Isaac was about to reach a dramatic climax. Abraham, a man of unwavering faith, had been given the most difficult command of his life: to sacrifice his only son Isaac in an act of total obedience to God. That journey to Mount Moriah was filled with anguish, questions, and a silence that hung heavy in the air. As they walked, Abraham's mind struggled between the grief of a father and the faith that sustained him. Isaac, in his innocence, walked beside his father, unaware of the emotional burden that weighed on Abraham. With each step, the anxiety grew, but so did Abraham's determination. He knew that true faith often requires courage and sacrifice. As they arrived at the place of sacrifice, the atmosphere seemed charged with palpable anticipation. Abraham built an altar. Each stone he placed a reminder of his trust in God's promises. Deep in his heart, He still wondered how this could be part of God's plan. But even in his agony, he believed that God knew what he was doing. When the most critical moment arrived, Abraham looked into the eyes of Isaac, who had no idea what was about to happen. The young man, still full of trust, asked, "Father, where's the lamb for the sacrifice?" These words broke Abraham's heart. "God will provide," he replied, trying to calm his own spirit. But the truth was that he too longed for this provision, for a sign that his faith would not be in vain. With tears in his eyes, Abraham bound Isaac and laid him on the altar. The room seemed completely still, as if all of nature were awaiting the final decision. He raised the knife, his heart beating like a drum, when suddenly a cry echoed from heaven. "Abraham! Abraham!" It was an angel of the Lord, interrupting what seemed like a tragic outcome. "Do not lay a hand on the boy or do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, for you did not spare your only son." Just as the light of understanding dawned on his mind, a miracle occurred. As he looked around, he saw a lamb caught in a thicket. God had provided the sacrifice, sparing Isaac. The moment became a celebration of faith and obedience. Divine intervention not only saved Isaac's life, but it also brought home a fundamental truth. God always has a plan, even when we cannot see it. This experience was a living testament to God's care, his presence, preparing the way before us. The story of God's intervention in the lives of Abraham and Isaac is a powerful reminder that our vision is often limited. But God sees beyond what we can imagine. When we face difficulties and challenges, we can remember that there's a divine plan at work, even if our eyes cannot see it. Faith teaches us that even though we may be in the midst of a storm, calm can always be found by trusting in God. Like him, we are invited to believe that even in the most impossible situations, God can transform our crises into miracles. Therefore, when difficulties arise in our lives, may we remember the intervention of God, who is always working on our behalf. Each challenge is an opportunity to see the hand of God at work, bringing salvation and showing that he is faithful to his promises. After all, the true beauty of faith is in trusting that even when we do not see the plan. Number 15, God is always orchestrating something great for us. Do you understand this? Isn't it beautiful? Tell me in the comments what you think about this. Abraham's story is a living testament to the fact that God always reaffirms his promises. Every step of faith is a step toward a glorious future. He became the patriarch of a people who not only existed, but would become a nation marked by God's presence. But Abraham's legacy was not limited to the people of Israel. It extended far beyond, reaching cultures and civilizations around the world. The faith he cultivated bore fruit that would influence not only his descendants, but all who sought truth. God's promise to Abraham was not just a one bloodline. It was an invitation for all of us to become sons and daughters of promise, no matter where we come from. This story is a powerful reminder that our actions today can impact generations to come. Every choice we make, every act of kindness, every demonstration of faith, plants seeds that can grow and flourish far beyond our vision. Like Abraham, we are challenged to live in a way that leaves a positive legacy, a testament to love and faith. Abraham's life teaches us that even when challenges seem insurmountable, perseverance and faith can make the impossible a reality. May we learn to trust God, knowing that he has a plan not only for us, but also for those who come after us. Each of us has the ability to be an agent of change, impacting the future in ways we cannot always imagine. So, as we look at Abraham's life, may we be inspired by his journey. May his actions echo in the lives of our children, grandchildren, and future generations, ensuring that the legacy of faith, hope, and love continues to shine like the stars that once inspired a single man to believe he could change the world. Number 16. Believe you are amazing in God, and do you believe in yourself? And that God has not turned his back on you? Leave your comment. I want to know your opinion, and which state are you talking about when God asked him to leave his land and his people? One of the most significant moments in his life occurred when God made extraordinary promises, right? He promised that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the sky. How could a man who was already advanced in years believe that this was possible? But Abraham was not discouraged by logic. This faith transcended his understanding. It was a faith that saw beyond what the eyes could see. He learned that true faith is not blind belief, but a deep trust, a certainty that even in the storms of life, there is a divine purpose being worked out. When God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac, many would have hesitated, questioning the purpose of such a request. Pay attention or you will not prosper. Abraham heard a call that would change not only his life, but the lives of generations to come. His story, marked by faith and courage, continues to echo through the centuries, inspiring millions around the world. It is a story that reminds us that whenever we follow God's voice, we leave a legacy that transcends time and multiplies and attracts prosperity. Imagine right now that you are in Abraham's shoes, living surrounded by a rich culture full of traditions. Life was comfortable, but there was something inside him, a restlessness that would not leave him alone. It was a deep desire for meaning, a search for a greater purpose. When God told him to leave his land and his family, Abraham felt a mixture of fear and hope. What would come next was unknown, but the promise of a glorious future motivated him to move forward. By leaving his home, Abraham not only said goodbye to his homeland, but also to a life of certainty. Each step he took toward the promised land was an act of faith, a testimony of his willingness to trust in something greater. During his journey, he faced challenges, doubts, and difficulties. But in each of these moments, God was there, reaffirming his promises and encouraging Abraham to persevere. And he didn't just become a patriarch. He became a symbol of faith. His experiences teach us that true obedience is not the absence of fear, but the ability to move forward in spite of it. Every altar he built, every prayer he offered, every intercession he offered, created a legacy that would be passed down from generation to generation. Think about how Abraham's story resonates today. When we face challenges or moments of uncertainty, we can remember his courage. He is an example that listening to God's voice and obeying him can take us to extraordinary places. When we listen to and follow God's voice, we too leave a mark on the world around us. Our faith-based actions can transform lives, impact communities, and create a ripple effect that extends beyond what we can see. With every choice we make, we have the opportunity to leave a legacy, just as Abraham did. If we choose to act with integrity, compassion, and love, we are building a future that can inspire others to do the same. Abraham's story reminds us that we are not alone in our journey. We are a part of a great tapestry of faith that is interwoven throughout the history of humanity. So, may we be inspired by the life of Abraham and seek that deep connection with God. In doing so, we will not only be answering the divine call, but also leaving a legacy that can inspire the next generations. The story of Abraham is a call to action, an invitation for each of us to move forward, trust, and become a source of light and hope for the world. Do you want to prosper? Yes or no? 17. When we follow the voice of God, we not only transform our lives, but we also leave an eternal mark on the history of humanity by being part of the greatest project that exists on the face of the earth with God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Thank you for watching this far. Subscribe to the channel to continue receiving future content. And if you liked it, share this beautiful message with 3 more people close to your heart. God continues the Bible. Until the next video.